Welcome to Crushgasm, the podcast dedicated to the highs and lows of crushes from their first to their worst. We're going to cover them all with a cascade of characters, including our guest today, the self-love and unstuck yourself coach, Mallory Kiersten, a book nerd, artist, and lover of life, who is here to talk not only about their coaching and erotic blueprint work, but also their crush on a true icon of Tiger Beat, Zac Hanson. Mallory, how are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
Fantastic. Before we get started, can you tell people really quick where they can find you online?
Yeah, so I'm mallory.kiersten.888 on Facebook, and you can find me at The Joy Goddess on both Instagram and TikTok. And my website is MalloryKiersten.com.
Alrighty. Now, you first saw Zac Hanson when you were about 4th grade, which I think is like this prime age for a first big celebrity crush. But I want to know, had you liked anyone before that, maybe at school or maybe somebody on a TV show in passing?
I think I probably had a crush on another boy, probably either shortly before Zac Hanson, like a boy in my class. Who was super not interested. He had a girlfriend at the time, as whatever a girlfriend means in, 3rd grade. So, yeah. But I think Zac Hanson was probably my first, crush.
And it sounds like we're about the same age, because I think MMMBop dropped around the end of the school year when I was in 3rd grade, and I spent the entire summer obsessed with Taylor Hanson. Then I went back in the fall and everyone was making fun of them, so I pretended like I didn't like them because I was a weakling. What about you? Were you loud and proud with your love of Hanson?
Absolutely was loud and proud, and I, a little bit different. I actually get a little bit of a rush from, oh, you think you're going to tease me about this? Well, let me show you how much this does not bother me.
Yeah. You were a confident elementary school student.
I would say it was probably actually more of a facade, but I still actually have one of my Hanson t-shirts that I used to wear to school all the time. I sometimes will pull it out as a nightshirt nowadays, but it still fits. I had other reasons to be not super confident as an elementary school and a kid. And the big reason is I fit in a t-shirt now as an adult that I fit into when I was in 5th grade.
Oh, same.
Yeah.
It was very big. I was tall and wide, so I was saying I looked like the guy from The Blind Side, but in a skirt.
And I was short and round. Is how I would describe myself back then.
Yeah. Always the back of the class picture with the boys. Always. Yeah. For me. Yeah. So what about Zac made him stand out a bit more than Taylor and Isaac? You probably like them too, but for you, what was it about Zac Hanson?
I think, and we talked a little bit about this before we actually hit record, which was, my kind of interpretation of your the name of your podcast, Crushgasm, was I come from the Erotic Blueprint world, where we talk about orgasm, or the gasm part of the name of your podcast, in terms of that's our life force energy, right? And then the word crush is that all-encompassing sort of feeling, that longing, that just that all-encompassing desire almost. And I feel like this particular crush was, very reflective of my desire to love me, and all of who I was, and seeing reflected back at me through him, all of the things about myself that I was just aching to love. And
what?
So a big thing was musical talent. I, through not just him, but also obviously the music that he was making with his brothers, is, I learned how to sing upper harmony on songs because he sang upper harmony. And so I was like, I wonder if I could do this too. And that's how I learned. That's how I learned harmony, chords, and I started really kind of getting into music. And that was such a huge part of my life. Elementary school and beyond, it's still a huge part of my life. And I learned how to play drums because he was the drummer. And I still love it. I want to get myself one of those. It's on my list. I'm probably going to get it for myself for Christmas, but one of those electric drum kits. So that I can be respectful of my neighbors while being able to just kind of jam out.
So you picked up the drums, and I had Karen Jane DeWitt on. She came on to talk about Taylor Hanson, which she declared her lifelong crush. She actually got to meet him after our recording, which was pretty cool. I was like, that's maybe amazing. We put it out into the world, so maybe you'll meet Zac. But what she loved about Hanson was the musical aspect too. They were unlike the other kind of boy bands and girl groups at the times. They were actual musicians. Do you think, is that what's made them better than like Backstreet Boys and NSYNC for you?
Oh, absolutely. And the fact that it was organic, them coming together, it's like if you think about Backstreet Boys or Spice Girls, and by the way, I totally loved the Spice Girls too. And I totally had a crush also on Ginger Spice, Jerry Halliwell. But a little bit different, but it's different because with Hanson, it was organic how they came together versus, music business minds coming together and saying, how can we put together something that the public is going to like? Granted, there was the fair share, I would argue, with Hanson's music. There was a little bit of that because if you listen to Middle of Nowhere, when MMMBop first arrived on the scene, you can hear, at least I can hear when I go back and listen, the dilution for trying to get them out there as pop stars versus if you've listened to String Theory and their recording of MMMBop on that. And then I'm listening to them and I hear them, and underneath that I hear Simon and Garfunkel, I hear the Beatles, I hear all of their musical influences that they always talked about being their inspiration for creating music in the first place.
They just came out in a very consumerism time of pop music.
Yes.
Unfortunately. But fortunately for us, we got to, take it all in.
Right. But everything happens for a reason because look at how that worked out. They got their music out to this huge audience, right? And how many of us are still listening as they've, I would argue, come back down to who they truly are?
Yeah, and they got to come into their own. They're still doing things. But unlike a lot of musicians at the time, Zac was like probably the closest to our age, being like 12 when they came out. Do you think that helped amplify the crush? Like, oh, we're so close in age. Perhaps if I met him, I could make this happen.
Yeah, probably, because I think he was born in 86 and I was born in 87. Oh, he might have been born in 85. So I'm born in 87. I think he was born in 85 or 86. So he was the closest in age to me.
So you were like, possibly this could happen.
Possibly.
And for a lot of 90s kids, I feel like so many of our first concerts they coincided with our crushes. Mine was Backstreet Boys, yours was Hanson. Where did you see them and who did you go with?
I went with my mom, and we were in Northern California in the Bay Area. The Shoreline Amphitheater in Mountain View is where I saw them. And I just remember that, like, I was such a serious kid. I think that's another thing to really kind of amplify here, is that I was so serious. I took things very, very seriously. It was very, very rare that it's like I got a gift that, I was thankful, I was grateful. But when my mom presented me with those tickets, I had this huge well of emotion. Oh, Mom! And I just like hugged her. And she always cites that story. She was like, you just never really, I never let myself really feel emotion. So that's where music also came to be really, really important to me, because that was the place where I could express the things that I was feeling that maybe I couldn't articulate in words very well. And I remember that moment. I think, that would have been in 5th grade is when they went on the Live from Albertine tour. So I think I was in 5th grade when they did that tour. And that's when that was my very first concert. And it was amazing. It was amazing.
Did you were like, Mom, we have to go by the buses. We have to try to meet them. Anything like that?
No, nothing like that. We had nosebleed seats. So the amphitheater, it's like they have the place like kind of in the front that has seats and you're kind of close to the stage or whatever. But then there's the grass area in the back. And that's actually what our tickets were for that grass area in the back. We get there and apparently, I don't know if some people backed out or whatever, but my mom got in line to see if we could upgrade. And so we ended up being, I think, like 9th row, where we were even with the stage.
Oh.
On the side where Taylor performed. So it was on the stage left, but the right side of the amphitheater. So I was like eye level with Taylor the entire time. And I was just like, it just made my freaking day.
I can only imagine.
Yeah,
especially when you're a kid and back then, like celebrities and famous people just weren't as accessible. There was no social media or anything to follow and see their day to day. They were kind of these weird entities,
Right. They were untouchable. And now we get to see more of their humanity and who they are.
And have you seen them as an adult? Are you like, let me go walk down memory lane and go to one of their shows?
I have not, but I definitely still follow them on social media. I've been listening to String Theory on repeat recently. It's really, really funny. It's like after they released This Time Around, I had started moving out of it was VH1 and back when MTV was actually showing music videos. That's how long ago this was, right? I had kind of started moving out of that and more into I already know what I like. I don't want television and advertisements. I had started moving into this really rebellious stage, like most teenagers do. But my rebellion was more, I don't want advertisements. I don't want music, television, VH1 telling me what's popular right now. I'm going to like what I like, and I'm going to go with what I like. And for a while, it was mostly classical music. Once I got into kind of high school, I sort of stopped really listening to more popular music and started listening more to classical and learning the theory behind classical music and all of that stuff versus listening to more popular music. And so I kind of fell off the Hanson wagon for several years. And then probably once I graduated from college is when I started circling back.
I like that you said you went through this rebellious stage and then it was classical music.
I know. Right? Because most people's rebellion is I don't know, Nirvana, death metal, right?
Because for me, we actually were the same age. So I thought because after Backstreet Boys, I was about 8th grade going into 9th. And I was All Good Charlotte, Newfound Glory, Def Pop Punk, Warped Tour. So when you said Shoreline, that's where they have Warped Tour. So I was like, yeah.
And I'm giggling because you're telling me all these names that I've heard, but I don't know that I've ever actually listened to any of them.
You mean, are you missing out? Maybe.
Maybe.
I don't know if as an adult today could listen to that music and be like, oh, this is great. I think it was a time and place.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay. Potential.
It's definitely a time and place. Before we move on, is there a Hanson song that you would put on your life's playlist? Like just one singular song that kind of wraps up your love of them.
I mean, I know it's totally cliche, but MMMBop, but the very specific version from String Theory. And I actually do have that one on it's a playlist that I have for myself that is linked to some personal development work that I've done. So I do actually consider that my life's playlist. But Penny and Me is also on there. Because to me, they're both songs that feel very free.
Very I always free. Liked Weird. I think lyrically that's like the coolest song.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, this. I also was a big VH1 watcher, and I was like, this is so deep. Like 9 years old, being like, this is deep. This and Sheryl Crow are my life.
Yeah.
So,
I Will Come to You is another one that I really like.
That one's really good too. But since this is your Tiger Beat crush, I gotta ask, were you an avid reader or at least collector of those teen magazines back in the day?
Oh, 100%. I had one of those walls completely covered in my room with them. And not just them, like I had some Spice Girls, I had some Drew Barrymore, but it was essentially a big collage of Tiger Beat. Oh, Jonathan Taylor Thomas too.
I mean, he's kind of he's like the Mount Rushmore of 90s crushes. It's like he might not have been your favorite, but he was definitely in your heart. And God, to find that man today, I would just be so, if I ever saw him in public, I'd probably die. Would die. Just because it's like, he's so rare, you know, he's not in the spotlight.
Right. I think he moved more into directing and that kind of more the behind the scenes stuff. I think last I read about JTT, that was.
I'll find him.
Oh, Melissa Joan Hart was another one. Like I had the, oh my gosh, this is so 90s.
You had all the hitters. The heavy hitters. So, I recently talked to Chris and Deb. They host Today We Laughed and Learned about their 80s movie crush. They're Gen X, so they talked about The Outsiders because that movie is just like overflowing with these gorgeous men. And Chris admitted her room, like ours, was a fire hazard with all the posters and pinups from the magazines. But then we also talked like how today kids aren't doing that as much. Like their Tiger Beat's kind of just like scrolling through Instagram and liking the pictures of the celebrities. Do you think that it's like with social media, being a fangirl today is just as satisfying? Or do you think they're missing that, like the Tiger Beats and all that?
I mean, I think it probably depends on the kid. I think they probably experience a deeper connection. Whereas maybe us in the 90s or us in the 80s, having the posters up fostered as much connection as we possibly could have without social media. I think maybe the kids today actually might feel a little bit more connected, because how do they connect with their real life friends? Texting, social media, you know? I think it's probably quite similar, to be honest.
Just different strokes for different folks, or whatever they said, whatever the saying goes. So we mentioned that your love of Hanson, you kind of were like stepped away for a minute. You were like too cool for school, got into classical music.
Right. Because classical music is so cool. All the kids are listening to it.
You're off the beaten path. But and then you went back and kind of in college. What made you step back into it?
I think I was going through a really difficult time in college, quarter life crisis and all, where I was just having this who am I moment, you know, getting ready to graduate, getting ready to go out in a world where that was really quite scary to me. You know, I had received a lot of my validation through my grades and how many extracurriculars that I could participate in. And that's just not life. That's literally just school. You know, heading out into a world where it's like, no one's grading you, no one's evaluating you. And I'm like, well, how do I know that I'm doing life right? like who's going to give me an A in life?
I feel you. Were you like an honor roll student?
Yes, all
Okay,
that,
yeah.
all
There
that
needs
crap.
to be like a support group for the former honor roll kids, current adult hot messes is the group I want to start.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that so much.
Because
Um,
that's what I call myself.
yeah. So I guess I was having an identity crisis, and I was like, "Who am I? Who am I really?" And I started really wanting to go back to my roots, and to me, my musical roots was Hanson.
And I was thinking about, you said you want to go back to your roots, and when I talked to Mike Valdez, he came on to talk about his crush on the idea of nostalgia, because he said nostalgia is like reverse trauma. It's the comfort we get in the past. Do you think that was part of it too? You're like, well, I know Hanson. I know that's my happy place from when I was young, and you're going through this quarter life crisis. I think I did that too. I got back into Backstreet Boys during college, and I was like, okay, this is cool, because it is scary to start approaching that senior year and graduation.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that was part of it. Um, yeah, it was the thing that I was seeking comfort in at the time. Yeah, I think there was some nostalgia there, because I definitely started back with Middle of Nowhere and then realized, hey, wait a minute, between this time around and today, they've actually released like 4 or 5 other CDs that I never even listened to. What the heck? And then I started listening to some of their newer stuff, and yeah, it's just been kind of a part of my musical tastes.
And you said you keep tabs on them. You'll check the social medias. Do you think the crush still lingers a little bit when you see him today, like on Instagram or Twitter, TikTok?
No, no. I don't. I wouldn't say that there's a crush there anymore, but it's nice looking at them and seeing them, and I can still see them as children, and like this, and feel like I met you, but I didn't meet you when we were kids. Like, I wouldn't say that there's a crush there still, but there's mad respect.
All right.
Mad respect for everything that they do.
Before we move on and talk more about what you have going on, I'd love to know what 4th grade Mallory envisioned her life like with Zac Hanson.
I think she thought she was going to be able to go on tour with them. She was going to be able to play tambourine because they needed a tambourine player. I think she envisioned life being highly musical with him.
Or did you envision a lot of kids, because they come from a big family, and today out of the 3 of them, they have 15 total kids?
Yeah, I was not thinking about kids at all. I was not thinking about kids. I was not thinking about marriage. And I think it's probably, worth stating that that was never, ever a part of my desires for my life was kids, which is probably why it wouldn't have worked out with Zac Hanson if we had met and started dating.
I mean, he has 5, so that's a lot. Yeah. Isaac is really slowing him down with only 3. So.
Oh my goodness, I know, and Taylor has like a bunch.
7.
He has like 8, right? Oh,
7.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I'm sure, I don't know his wife's age, but I'm sure they'll keep going as long as they can.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
now it's
he's got a band right there.
Yeah. I mean, they have a football team, a band, they could have a Congress, a Senate. Like they're starting their own country over in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to talk more about what you have going on, but we're going to start with self-love and unstuck yourself, which I'm a Drag Race fan. So not to say, they always talk about untuck. So I was really practicing to not say that. So unstuck yourself.
Yeah.
When did you get that going, and what initially led you down this path?
Ooh, that's a big question. I think my own journey to love and acceptance of myself is probably the biggest needle mover into getting into the land of self-love. And it's only within the last year that I've been an Unstuck Yourself coach, because Unstuck Yourself is a beautiful space of humans that my mentor created. And what she did essentially was she created this space of humans who are, committed to creating change in their life, setting boundaries, prioritizing self-care, engaging in conscious communication strategies, that sort of thing. And she took 4 more of us on to become coaches in the space. And I really attribute that community, those communities, because there's several different Unstuck Yourself communities, but I really attribute those communities to my personal growth and my coming into love for myself, unconditional love for myself. And so I now have this opportunity to give back, and that's amazing.
And when did you start realizing you needed to love yourself more? Because it's a hard thing. It
really is. I would argue that, we got on this call, we started talking about crushes. And as I stated kind of at the beginning of this call, I feel like our crushes, especially the celebrity ones, especially the ones that we know aren't going to happen, I think those are really opportunities to kind of look in the mirror and see the aspects in ourselves that we see in them. So, I talked about Zac and the musical aspect, but there was also Zac, the kind of, he was known as the wacky one, right? Mm-hmm. So he got to be weird and talk in weird voices, and he'd be really goofy. And, those were parts of myself that I could see in him and totally crush on, but I wasn't quite ready to see in myself and love about myself yet. And the same thing with, Jerry Halliwell from the Spice Girls. She had this really amazing sex appeal. She had the large breasts, and I was already, I was 10 years old, and I had gone, I'd gone through puberty when I was 9. I already had a woman's body. So that was an opportunity for me to look at my body and love my body. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so I think it kind of dawned on me pretty young. I think I just took a lot of detours to finally get there.
And on a grand scale, do you think that people in America are suffering from a self-love deficiency?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the question I get all the time with regards to self-love is, how do I love myself and not turn into a total narcissist? Mm-hmm. And so my response to that is that, love, true, deep, actual love is love. It by nature cannot be narcissism. It's like asking the question, how do I keep this chair that I'm sitting in from turning into a panther? It's just not going to happen. They're 2 totally separate things. Mm-hmm. And I think we get them confused all the time, because the image that we get of self-love are people who take themselves on 5-star vacations, or they luxuriate in a bubble bath, or they have the image, the Instagrammable things in their lives that are quote unquote indicators of their self-love. And that's not the case. Self-love is choosing you. It's choosing you above the fear of having a conversation with your boss about getting a raise. It's choosing you over the discomfort of having a boundaries conversation with that family member who's constantly just gets you, It's choosing you above all of the things on your schedule that are causing you burnout.
And so you're doing the self-love and Unstuck Yourself, but when did the Erotic Blueprint come into play? Because you said you were this really serious kid, so I don't imagine a real serious person going into the erotic space.
And if you had asked me even, 2 years ago if this was the direction that I was going, I don't know that I would have said, yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I think the thing to remember about, Erotic Blueprint, erotic energy, it's life force energy. And for me, the Erotic Blueprints have been highly influential in not just it affects life, Mm-hmm. It's the life force energy, that zest for life that we have. And most of the time it's pretty dormant in us because we get really caught in that rut of go to work, pay bills, come home, do laundry, do dishes, that kind of stuff. We get into kind of this rut. And Erotic Blueprint for me was all about finding pleasure and passion in life. And if you look up anything about the Erotic Blueprints, it's, about pleasure and passion in the bedroom. And I very quickly made the connection that what kind of brings us to pleasure and passion there is actually what brings us to pleasure and passion in life. And can I talk about them? Like what they are? Yeah. Okay, great. So there's 5 erotic blueprints. And essentially, this is a typing system similar to the 5 love languages, if you're familiar with that. But it's a typing system. There's 5 blueprints, and they are the energetic, the sensual, the sexual, the shapeshifter, and the kinky. So the energetics, their turn-ons are spaciousness, tease, anticipation, and I feel like this is super applicable for a Crushgasm podcast, because when it's a celebrity crush or somebody that you know it's not going to happen, you get that opportunity to like have that anticipation and tease of something that you're never quite gonna have. And you can really get a lot of pleasure about like being in that space of anticipation.
Like the fantasy.
Yeah. So I was like, do I go into energetic touch? Well, okay. So with the energetic, superpowers for the energetic blueprint. So there's superpowers and challenges or shadow aspects of each blueprint. But the superpowers for the energetic is that they can actually orgasm without even being touched, because they're that energetically sensitive. So if you've ever felt that spark, that vibe between you and a lover, and you look at them across the room, they can actually just go into like fits of orgasm right then and there. The shadow aspect of this blueprint is that if, because they are so energetically sensitive, if too much is happening too fast, so if someone comes at them from across the room that they're interested in, but they come, too fast, too quickly, they can actually experience shutdown and completely lose turn on. They need that space. They need that anticipation. They need that opportunity for longing. So that's the energetic. I'm sure you could hear my energetic a lot when I spoke on this call. The sensual blueprint, their turn-ons are all the senses. So these are the people that wear like really yummy feeling clothes on their body. They like to have all their favorite scents in their house. If they're sensual like me, they have plants everywhere because it makes their space feel beautiful. And they want stuff that engages all the senses. So if we're talking about the bedroom, these are the people that have Barry White in the background. They maybe have, pieces of cut up fruit on the nightstand or pieces of chocolate to engage that sense of taste. They have flowers and rose petals everywhere, like that sort of thing, if you're thinking about setting up a space for intimacy, right? The superpowers is that pleasure for them is an all body experience, because it's all of their senses being engaged all at once. So it's a total body experience for them. The shadow for this side is that, or for this blueprint, is that they can get in their heads. So they set up this beautiful space for intimacy. They're getting ready to engage with a lover or lovers. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, I had this beautiful space, and now there's underwear and socks on the floor. And then they can't stop thinking about the underwear and socks that are on the floor.
Looking at it like, oh my God.
So, and that can, as you might imagine, that can totally shut down pleasure in 0.2 seconds, right?
Yeah.
The third blueprint is the sexual blueprint. And this blueprint is what we think of as sex in this world. That it's, their turn-ons are genitals, nudity, the promise of an orgasm, penetration, that type of stuff. And, it's what we think of as being sex in this country. And their superpowers are that they can experience turn on like that. They can go like 0 to 60 in 0.2 seconds. Like they don't need a highly erotic context necessarily to experience turn on. They can just experience it spontaneously.
Would you say most like cisgender hetero males are the sexual blueprint?
I would say that they are probably conditioned to be.
Yeah. Like society is like, look, you like boobs, and they're like, okay.
Yeah. And so superpowers is the turn on. But the shadow side of that is that if that's actually what's showing up for them, if that's actually what's showing up in their body, particularly, well, it can show up with cis men and cis women, but just in different ways, is that, you know, they can experience shame, you know, because there are so many men out there that they don't want to feel like they're pushing, but they have this kind of battle. They don't want to feel like they're pushing, but they're like, hey, I'm turned on, and like, what do I do? Like, so that could show up for them. And, you know, the way that it shows up for, you know, people who are socialized to be women, is that if they are highly sexual, then they are slutty, or, you know, that type of, you know, that type of judgment can really show up for them as well. The other shadow to this blueprint too is that because they can be so goal focused, like they want that orgasm, they want it, they miss out on all of the pleasure that's available to them along the way.
They're too focused on the end result to enjoy the journey.
Right. And, you know, can you think of areas in life where that shows up? Where I'll be happy when I get XYZ, when I get the job, when I'm making this much money, right? And then life sort of passes you by. Do you see the connection to life in all of this, right? So that's the sexual. The fourth blueprint is the kinky blueprint. Don't freak out. I'm not talking about BDSM. I mean, I'm not talking about BDSM, but I'm not only talking about that. So kinky blueprints are turned on by the taboo. So 10-year-old Mallory, who wore her proudly wore her Hanson shirts to be like, a challenge, like that could be potentially very kinky. And yes, I was a very, very kinky child by this blueprint, right? Because their turn-ons are anything that's taboo. So whatever is taboo for you. So if you've always had sex with the lights off, it could be really, really kinky to have sex with the lights on. Like, yeah. And I can't tell you how many people I have in my field right now who, you know, they take the Erotic Blueprint quiz and they're like, kinky is testing as my number one. I don't really understand this. And so my question to them is usually, well, did you grow up in an environment where sex was talked about openly? And they go, oh no, we never talked about it. Oh no. And I go, well, there's the kink. Because we're talking about the subject of sexuality, which is very taboo for you. So there it is, right there.
I was also thinking maybe like thrill seekers, like people that like to skydive and like those kind of things. You think they're more like in the kinky realm of the real world? Like,
yeah, that could absolutely, anything that pushes, you know, that pushes the boundaries of who we think that we are, right? Or that expands the not pushes, but like, well, yeah, I guess pushes, but that expands the boundaries of who we think that we are. So for me, personal development work is highly kinky because of that reason, because I'm constantly expanding outwards of who that I think that I am in any given moment. Well, I am this. And then I experience a course or I go through mentorship or something like that, and it expands my definition of who I am and it pushes me out of this box that I've placed myself in. That's highly, highly kinky for me. So it's whatever pushes the boundaries. It could be that thrill-seeking stuff. More power to you if you want to jump off of a building with a rope tied to you. Like, That is not my kink. However, I will go really, really fast on a roller coaster and go upside down on a roller coaster. That is highly thrill-seeking for me. So, superpowers for the kinky is that because there's this element of edge pushing, they tend to be really adept at consent conversations because there has to be a high level of safety in order to push those edges. And they tend to be really, really creative too, because there's so much to kink. There's just so many things that could be explored in that area. And, the shadow side to this is that, depending on the desire, there can be shame around it, especially if it's something really off the beaten path. The other kind of shadow side to this blueprint too is that while there is this endless capacity for creativity, there's also a possibility of getting stuck in a rut. Like, I have such and such fetish, so I need to experience this fetish in order to get to my pleasure. So getting caught in a rut would be a shadow for the kinky. And so the last one is the shapeshifter. And I love this one so much because the shapeshifter is turned on by all of the other 4 blueprints. And not just turned on by it, not just likes it, but actually needs all of it in order to feel fully satisfied.
Like, they have needed in them or in their partners?
Yes.
All of the above.
Yeah. So they need it all. So whether they create it for themselves, whether they experience it with a lover, they need it all. Shapeshifters, their superpowers is they tend to make really amazing lovers. They tend to make really highly intuitive lovers because they're fluent in all of the other blueprints. So no matter what their partner is, they can have some really sexy fun time. And then the shadow side to this blueprint is that because of their ability to speak all of the other blueprints fluently, they can resort to people pleasing in the bedroom. Where
that down, yeah. I was like, these people sound like if you put this in the real world context outside of the bedroom, it sounds like they'll be people pleasers. Yep.
Could be. Mm-hmm. And the other side of this too is that because they need it all, they can often feel like they're too much or they're asking for too much. That too much story can really come up for a shapeshifter a lot.
Interesting. So shapeshifter kind of takes away I was wondering if you could be, energetic and kinky. Can you be a mix of things?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So you're not, but maybe it's you're more dominant in one than the other, but you have a little bit of it in there.
Right. So absolutely. This is not meant to be another thing for people to pigeonhole themselves into at all. This is, I sometimes talk about it in terms of it's the sexual science of differentiation. There's similarities and commonalities, but in general, this is a unique path that you get to discover for yourself. Whether you're partnered, whether you're in a throuple, whether you're single, this gets to be something that you define and discover for yourself. So when we talk about kind of this layering of the blueprints, that's called a stack. And the way that mine currently layers is, and I say currently because that's the other thing about this, is that the more that you discover, the more that you play with it, the more that you learn, it can actually shift over time. So right now, as it stands with me, is I am highly shapeshifter. I am personally working through my own stories of too much. And I'm coming into a really deep acceptance that I need it all in my life. And I also happen to be highly energetic. You heard that throughout my story, this longing, this spaciousness, this tease, this anticipation. And I'm also highly sensual. So the ways that I sort of provide that for myself in life is the example that I give for the energetic really, really freaks people out, because most time management systems tell us that if you want to do something, you need to make sure that you schedule it, right? Mm-hmm. So there's people running out there, and I was one of them, with everything in their schedule, like scheduled out to the 5-minute increment. And I was wondering why I was so stressed and burned out the entire time, because my energetic blueprint needs space, needs time to just be. So I deleted every single thing off of my calendar that wasn't like something that like I had to be somewhere at a certain time, an interview like this, or a client session, or a doctor's appointment. Everything got taken off my calendar. And oh my gosh, the space that opened up for me. The relaxation I felt in my body being able to do that. So that's a way that just how I energetic in life. And then, I mentioned that I have this room with like plants everywhere. My home has plants everywhere. I'm currently sitting in a chair with a big fluffy pink pillow behind me that feels really good. Like, so I feed my sensual by like creating beautiful space for myself, having textures on my body that I absolutely love. Even just taking like 10 seconds in the morning to just smell your coffee, feel it on your tongue as you're taking that first sip, and just indulging in the simple pleasures of life, because pleasure is everywhere.
It sounds like this blueprint also goes hand in hand with the self-love then.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And in doing this, what do you think, what have you found is kind of the most common blueprint?
I think it depends on the coach. So there's about 300 erotic blueprint coaches in the world right now. And I think that I think that, the kinky people out there are going to find coaches who tend to be higher in kink. Whether or not they realize that's actually their dominant blueprint, I just find that they just sort of gravitate toward one another. I do, at the time of this recording, I do want to be forthcoming about this. I'm currently a blueprint coach in training. I will be certified within the next month or so. So the people that tend to kind of come toward me tend to be more energetic sensuals because I myself am more energetic sensual. But I see it just all over that like blueprints tend to kind of gravitate toward one another. Very, very loosely, there was a very informal kind of study done in the erotic blueprint community that just asked for, basic identification, cis woman, cis man, trans, and the findings in general was that there were slightly more cis women who tended to be on the side of the energetic sensual. And there was a slight tendency for cis men to be more on the sexual side. And admittedly, this is very, very limited as far as trans information that was coming through. But that's the last that I heard about that specifically.
So when people sign up for the Erotic Blueprint breakthrough with you, what do they like? What can they expect? Like, what happens? What's going
on? Your whole life will blow up in the best way. The course itself is 8 modules long. And typically what I do is I engage people for 6 months of weekly work with me, and we go through the course together. And what typically happens is this is a highly triggering subject for so many people, and so what the 6 months does is provide space for us to work through them, be with what arises, allow time for integration, that kind of stuff, because it can be challenging. And the worst thing I have found is that, you know, when you're experiencing a trigger and then you push yourself through it anyway. It's I found that to be more damaging than just having the space to just actually process it. So didn't mean to scare anybody off, but you know that you're held, know that, you know, my presence is there and that I'm there, right there with you, and you're held.
Is it individual, or do you do like group session, like group work too?
I personally am doing one-on-one. I'm open to working with couples, but it is really important that each person in the couple or throuple or whatever role, that they have their own experience and that they have their own journey. And if that also incorporates, some sessions where everybody's together, that's great, but it's really important for each person to have their own experience so that they can really come to terms with what's pleasure for them, being whole people, separately. And so then when they come together, it can just be mind-blowing. In the Unstuck Yourself world, there is a course that will likely be running beginning of January called Unstuck Your Sex, which is a group program where, yes, we essentially go through the Erotic Blueprint breakthrough course, and you have group coaching calls rather than one-on-one interaction. So it's really just a preference to whether you have the group interaction or you have the one-on-one support. I have personally experienced both, and I would say that, the healing is just, it can happen so well in either scenario.
Well, look at us. We started with Zac Hanson, and then we ended with this lesson of this. Like, I learned so much. Like, I talked to a woman who does Tokyo tours. I learned so much about Tokyo. This is why I like doing this. I get you in with a crush, and then I get an education, a little bit of an education. So where can people find you and your services online? Let's remind the people.
Yeah, so my website is MalloryKiersten.com. You can find me on Facebook. That tends to be where I frequent. Is Mallory.Kiersten.888. And then I'm the Joy Goddess on Instagram and TikTok.
All right, Mallory. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to me about your Tiger Beat crush and so much more. And everyone, you can find all of Mallory's information below. And until next time, as always, keep crushing it.